What's up, everyone, and welcome to this week's Cybersecurity Weekly, where we review the security events that happened in the last week. As always, I have broken the stories down in the timeline, and there is a list of the stories with time markers in the description below. So you can click on any one of those time markers to jump around to any story that you want. If you find my work valuable in any way, of course I ask you to hit the like button and share this episode with anyone you know who can benefit from any of these cybersecurity stories. And of course, if you have not already, please also consider subscribing to my channel.
Oh, drat these computers. They're so naughty and so complex. I could pinch them.
We start off today with phishing. The threat actors behind the attacks on Twilio and Cloudflare have been linked to a large-scale phishing campaign that targeted 136 organizations. Security firm Group IB reported most of the victims are organizations providing IT, software development, and cloud services. The campaign, codenamed Octopus, resulted in the compromise of 9,931 accounts, 3,121 compromised user credentials with email. Threat actors behind the Octopus campaign aimed at obtaining Okta identity credentials and two-factor authentication codes from users of the targeted organizations. Then, the attackers could gain unauthorized access to any enterprise resources by using this information. Experts pointed out that despite using low-skill methods, threat actors were able to compromise a large number of well-known organizations. Group IB speculates that the attack was planned carefully in advance because once the attackers compromised an organization, they were quickly able to pivot and launch subsequent supply chain attacks. The threat actors targeted employees of companies that are customers of IAM leader Okta. The attack chain started with text messages sent to the victims containing links to phishing sites that mimicked the Okta authentication page of the respected targeted entities. In total, the Group IB Threat Intelligence Team detected 169 unique domains involved in the Octopus campaign, reads the analysis published by Group IB. These domains were all used by the attackers to target organizations in multiple industries, located mostly in the United States and Canada. Based on the fact that all of these organizations use Okta's identity and access management services to secure access to enterprise resources, we named this campaign Octopus. Kind of makes sense. A phishing site used in this campaign is static. This means that threat actors cannot interact with victims in real time. To avoid the expiration of two-factor authentication codes, the attackers need to use the compromised data as soon as they get it. For this reason, they need monitoring tools to consistently or continuously. They need to monitor their tools continuously and use the credentials as soon as they receive them. The phishing kit used in this campaign used Telegram channel to drop the compromised information. The experts linked one of the channel administrators, who used the moniker X, to a Twitter and GitHub account that suggests the individual may be located in North Carolina. Below is the list of recommendations provided by Group IB to mitigate similar attacks for your organization. End users should always check carefully the URL of the site where you are entering your credentials. This is especially important for users with privileged accounts. It's important for everybody. What do you mean, especially for privileged accounts? It's important for everybody. Anyway, number 2, treat all URLs that were received from unknown sources as suspicious. If in doubt, forward them to your security team for analysis. Number 3, implement a FIDO2 compliant security key from a vendor like YubiKey for multi-factor authentication like Cloudflare suggests. Number 4, if you think your credentials might have been compromised, immediately change your password, sign off from all active sessions, and report the incident to your manager and security team. For that matter, most security policies that I see have you rotate your password on a regular basis so that if somebody happens to get credentials through some leak somewhere else, those credentials are outdated. The AiTM phishing campaign also targets G Suite users. The threat actors behind a large-scale adversary in the middle, or AiTM, phishing campaign targeting enterprise users of Microsoft email services responded targeting Google G Suite users. In AiTM phishing, threat actors set up a proxy server between a target user and the website the user wishes to visit, which is the phishing site under the control of the attackers. The proxy server allows attackers to access the traffic and capture the target's password and the session cookie. Once the credentials are obtained and session cookies are also obtained to access users' mailboxes, threat actors launched business email compromise, or BEC, campaigns against other targets. Microsoft experts believe that the AiTM phishing campaign was used to target more than 10,000 organizations since September 2021. Beginning in mid-July 2022, researchers from the security firm Zscaler started observing AiTM phishing attacks against G Suite users. These attacks are quite similar to the ones that targeted Microsoft users in past months. Experts observed the same attacks, TTPs, and also an overlap of infrastructure. In some cases, the attackers switched from Microsoft AiTM phishing to Gmail phishing using the same infrastructure. This campaign specifically targeted chief executives and other senior members of various organizations which use G Suite, hence the BEC attack, reads the analysis published by Zscaler. It is important to note that AiTM phishing kits can be used to target various websites and bypass multi-factor authentication. By using fishlets crafted to target a specific legitimate website, attackers can quickly reuse the AiTM phishing technique against a new target website. The researchers pointed out that Gmail AiTM phishing campaign had a much lower volume of targets compared to the Microsoft AiTM phishing attack. The attack chain starts with emails containing a malicious link. This link leverages multiple levels of redirection and abuses open to redirect pages to redirect the users to Gmail phishing's domain. Some of you who have been watching my episodes might remember who was attacked with open redirect. That's right. The phishing messages impersonated Google and pretended to be password expiry reminder emails urging recipients to click the link to extend their access. Threat actors also performed a fingerprinting on the client to determine whether it is a real user or an automated analysis system. One of the redirection processes employed by the threat actors abused open redirect pages of Google Ads and Snapchat. Snapchat was one of the companies. What was the other one? Amex. That's right. This process is similar to the one observed in the Microsoft AiTM phishing campaign. Another variant of the attack employed compromised websites hosting a base64 encoded version of the second stage redirector and the victim's email address in the URL. Attackers used JavaScript hosted on compromised domains as an intermediate redirector. It's important to understand that such attacks are not limited to only Microsoft and Gmail enterprise users. An attacker can bypass multi-factor authentication protection on many different services using this method, concludes the report. Even though security features such as multi-factor authentication add an extra layer of security, they should not be considered as a silver bullet to protect against phishing attacks. With the use of advanced phishing kits and clever evasion techniques, threat actors can bypass both traditional as well as advanced security solutions. We now move on to patches. The virtualization giant VMware this week released patches to address an important security flaw tracked to CVE 2022-31676, which impacts the VMware Tools suite of utilities. VMware Tools is a set of services and modules that enable several features in company products for better management of and seamless user interactions with guests' operating systems. An attacker with local non-administrative access to the guest OS can trigger the CVE 2022-31676 flaw to escalate privileges on a compromised system. VMware Tools was impacted by a local privilege escalation vulnerability, reads the advisory. A malicious actor with local non-administrative access to the guest OS can escalate privileges as a root user within the virtual machine. The flaw impacts tools on both Windows and Linux platforms. Fixed version released by the company are 12.1.0 and 10.3.25. DevOps platform GitLab has released security updates to fix a critical remote code execution vulnerability tracked to CVE 2022-2884 with a CVSS score of 9.9, affecting its GitLab Community Edition and Enterprise Edition releases. An authenticated attacker can trigger the flaw via the GitHub Import API. A vulnerability in GitLab CEE affecting all versions starting from 11.3.4 before 15.1.5 or 11.3.4 up to 15.1.4, all versions starting from 15.2 before 15.2.3, all versions starting from 15.3 before 15.31. Doesn't that just mean 15.3 and 15.3? Allows an authenticated user to achieve remote code execution via the import from GitHub API endpoint, reads the advisory published by the company. We strongly recommend that all installations running a version affected by the issues described are upgraded to the latest version as soon as possible. The researchers reported the vulnerability through the company HackerOne bug bounty program. The company also provided a workaround for those unable to update their installations immediately. GitLab recommends disabling the GitHub import function from the Visibility and Access Controls tab in the Settings menu once authenticated as administrator. It is still unclear if the vulnerability is actively exploited in attacks in the wild, but you can rest assured somebody found it and somebody's going to try to take advantage of it. So patch. We now move on to attacks, vulnerabilities, and updates. Atlassian fixed a critical flaw in Bitbucket server and data center tracked to CVE 2022 36804 that could be exploited to execute malicious code on vulnerable installs. The flaw is a command injection vulnerability that can be exploited via specially crafted HTTP requests. This advisory discloses a critical severity security vulnerability, which was introduced in version 7.0.0 of Bitbucket server and data center, reads the advisory. There is a command injection vulnerability in multiple API endpoints of Bitbucket server and data center. An attacker with access to a public repository or with read permissions to a private Bitbucket repository can execute arbitrary code by sending a malicious HTTP request. The issue impacts all versions released after 6.1.17, including 7.0.0, and newer are infected. This means that all installs that are running any versions between 7.0.0 and 8.3.0 inclusive are impacted. Domains hosted by Atlassian are not affected by this issue. The popular researcher Mordecai Guri from the Ben Gurion University of the Negev in Israel devised an attack technique named GAIROSCOPE to exfiltrate data from air-gapped systems using ultrasonic tones and smartphone gyroscopes. The attack requires that the threat actor has in advance installed malware on the air-gapped system as well as on a smartphone, which must be located in the proximity of the system. The malware installed in the air-gapped systems generates ultrasonic tones in the resonance frequencies of the MEMS gyroscope, which produce tiny mechanical oscillations within the smartphone's gyroscope. The frequencies are inaudible, and the mechanical oscillations can be demodulated into binary information. The researcher pointed out that the gyroscope in smartphones is considered to be a safe sensor and can be used legitimately from mobile apps and JavaScript without specific permissions, unlike other components like the microphone. The researchers added that in Android and iOS, there may be no visual indication, notification icons, or warning messages to the user that an application is using the gyroscope, like the indications in other sensitive sensors. Our experiments show that attackers can exfiltrate sensitive information from air-gapped computers to smartphones located a few meters away via speakers to gyroscope convert channel, reads the research paper. The malware on the air-gapped system gathers sensitive data, including passwords and encryption keys, and encodes it using frequency shift keying. In frequency shift keying, the data are represented by a change in the frequency of a carrier wave. On the receiving side, the phone receives the sounds using the device's gyroscope, and the malware running on the phone continuously samples and processes the output of the gyroscope. When the malware detects an exfiltration attempt, which is started using a specific bit sequence, it demodulates and decodes the data. The exfiltrated data can then be sent to the attacker using the phone's internet connection. If the exfiltration phase, or in the exfiltration phase, the malware encodes the data and broadcasts it to the environment using covert acoustic sound waves in a resonance frequency generated from the computer's loudspeakers. A nearby infected smartphone listens to the gyroscope, detects the transmission, demodulates and decodes the data, and transfers it to the attacker via the internet, e.g. over Wi-Fi, continues the paper. The air-gapped workstation broadcasts data modulated on top of ultrasonic waves in the resonance frequencies that oscillate to the nearby MEMS gyroscope. The application in the smartphone samples the gyroscope, demodulates the signal, and transmits the decoded data to the attacker through Wi-Fi. The researchers provided countermeasures to mitigate the GAIROSCOPE attack, such as speakers elimination and blocking ultrasonic filtering, signal jamming, signal monitoring, implementing sensor security, keeping systems in restricted zones defined by a different radius depending on the zone classification. Plex is an American streaming media service and a client-server media player platform. The company disclosed a data breach after threat actors have access to a limited subset of data stored in a compromised database. Exposed data includes emails, usernames, and encrypted passwords. In response to the unauthorized access to its database, the company urges all its users to immediately reset account passwords and log out of all devices connected to its services. The company is urging all users to immediately reset account passwords and log out of all devices connected to its service. A number of users report getting not authorized or you did not have access to the server messages for their own servers. Some report success when logging in and claiming the server again, though others have had no luck with this, reported the website 9to5Mac. It appears Plex has not arranged sufficient additional bandwidth to cope with the flurry of password change attempts. Additionally, the password reset page asks for the new password before the existing one, which is obviously unexpected and may account for some of the failures. Password management software firm LastPass disclosed a security breach. Threat actors had access to portions of the company's development environment through a single compromised developer account and stole portions of source code and some proprietary technical information. 2 weeks ago, we detected some unusual activity within portions of the LastPass development environment, reads a notice published by the company. We have determined that an unauthorized party gained access to portions of the LastPass development environment through a single compromised developer account and took portions of source code and some proprietary LastPass technical information. Our products and services are operating normally. In response to the incident, the company has deployed containment and mitigation measures and is implementing additional enhanced security measures. The company engaged a leading cybersecurity and forensics firm to investigate the incident. It confirmed that the data breach did not compromise users' master passwords. This incident did not compromise your master password. We never store or have knowledge of your master password. We utilize an industry-standard zero-knowledge architecture that ensures LastPass can never know or gain access to our customer's master password, continues the notice. At this time, the company claims that its investigation has shown no evidence of any unauthorized access to customer data. It is in its production environment. LastPass, which has more than 30 million users worldwide, states that it will continue to update its customers with the transparency they deserve. The Center Hospitalier Sud Francilien, a hospital southeast of Paris, has suffered a ransomware attack over the weekend. The attack disrupted emergency services and surgeries and forced the hospital to refer patients to other structures. According to the local media, threat actors demanded $10 million ransom to provide the decryption key to restore encrypted data. This attack on the computer network of the establishment makes inaccessible for the time being all the hospital's business software, the storage systems, in particular medical imaging, and information system relating to patient admissions, reads the announcement published by the CHSF. In this context, a first measure came into force on Sunday, August 21st, in order to guarantee the safety of care. Patients whose care requires access to technical platform are addressed within the network of public hospitals in Île-de-France, or Île-de-France, in conjunction with the regional health agency and with the assistance of SAMU SMER 91. In the emergency room, patients who present spontaneously are assessed and then possibly referred to the CHSF's Maison Médicale de Garde. Patients whose care requires access to technical platform are transferred to another establishment. The security breach led the staff to return to the paper file and the pen for the patients already hospitalized, confirmed the deputy mayor of Avry-Courcouronnes and president of the supervisory board of the CHSF, Mehdi Zerouf. The Center Hospitalier Sud Francilien notified local authorities and the National Information Systems Security Agency. An investigation for intrusion into the computer system and for attempted extortion in an organized gang has been opened to the cybercrime section of the Paris prosecutor's office. Said the latter, who specified that the investigations were entrusted to the Gendarmes of the Center Fight Against Digital Crime, C3N, reported the French Le Monde. According to the French website L'Image IT, a source close to the investigation confirmed that the attack was launched by the affiliate of Lockbit 3.0 ransomware as a service. Lockbit gang has yet to clarify whether or not they consider this attack to be a violation of the rules applied to their affiliates. Microsoft shared details of a critical Chrome operating system vulnerability tracked to CVE 2022-2587 with a CVSS score of 9.8. The flaw is an out-of-bounds write issue in OS audio server that could be exploited to trigger a denial of service condition or, under specific circumstances, to achieve remote code execution. Microsoft discovered a memory corruption vulnerability in a ChromeOS component that can be triggered remotely, allowing attackers to perform either a denial of service or, in extreme cases, remote code execution, reads the advisory published by Microsoft. Microsoft reported the issue to Google in April 2022 as a part of a Chromium bug tracking system. Google addressed the vulnerability in June, and attacker can trigger the flaw using malformed metadata associated with the songs. Microsoft discovered a function in the server that did not check a user-supplied identity argument, leading to a heap-based buffer overflow. The OS audio server contains a method that extracts the identity from metadata representing a song's title. An attacker can trigger the flaw by modifying the audio metadata either from the browser or via Bluetooth when a new song is being played. We discovered the vulnerability could be remotely triggered by manipulating audio metadata. Attackers could have lured users into meeting these conditions, such as by simply playing a new song in a browser or from a paired Bluetooth device, or leveraged adversary in the middle capabilities to exploit the vulnerability remotely. Continues the advisory. The impact of heap-based buffer overflow ranges from simple DOS to full-fledged RCE, although it's possible to allocate and free chunks through media metadata manipulation. Performing the precise heap grooming is not trivial in this case, and attackers would need to chain the exploit with other vulnerabilities to successfully execute an arbitrary code. Researchers from Dr. Web discovered backdoors in the system partition of budget Android device models that are counterfeit versions of famous brand name models. The malware targets WhatsApp and WhatsApp business messaging apps and can allow attackers to conduct multiple malicious activities. Among them is the interception of chats and the theft of the confidential information that could be found in them. This malware can also execute spam campaigns and various scam schemes. This, however, is not the only risk factor for users, reads the post published by Dr. Web. The affected devices are claimed to have a modem and secure Android OS version installed on them, but in reality, they're based on an obsolete version subject to multiple vulnerabilities. Dr. Web became aware of the malicious campaign in July 2022 after several users contacted the security firm to report suspicious activity on their Android devices. The researchers discovered changes in the system's storage area, as well as the appearance of the same malicious code in the system partition of multiple models, including P48 Pro, Redmi Note 8, Note 30U, and Mate 40. The experts noticed that all the devices were copycats of famous brand name models. The names are consonant with the names of some of the models produced by the popular manufacturers. Another circumstance discovered by the experts is all the devices were running outdated operating system versions like Android 4.4.2 instead of having one of the latest operating system versions installed on them as reported in device details. Dr. Web researchers noticed changes in the /system libcutils.so and system libmtd.so objects. The object libcutils.so is a system library that has been modified in a way that when it is used by an application, a Trojan-tracked Android backdoor.3105, which is included in the libmtd.so file, is executed. If WhatsApp and WhatsApp business messengers or settings and phone system apps are used using the libmtd.so, it triggers the second stage of the infection. The malware copies another backdoor into the directory of the appropriate app and launches it. Dr. Web researchers track this backdoor as android.backdoor854.origin. This backdoor allows operators to download and install additional malicious modules. If the WP_supplicant system app, which allows controlling wireless connections, was involved in the launch of the backdoor, Android.backdoor.3104 starts a local server. It allows a remote or local client to connect and operate in the MySH console application, which must first be installed on a device or initially present in its firmware. Malicious actors embed them into various system components like firmware updating software, the default settings app, or the component responsible for the system graphical interface. While in operation, these Trojans execute various Lua scripts that they particularly use to download and install other software. It is just such a Trojan, Android Fake Updates 1.origin, that has been discovered on one of the target smartphones, concludes Dr. Web. To avoid the risk of becoming a victim of such malware attacks, experts recommend to purchase mobile devices only from official stores and legitimate distributors and legitimate companies or manufacturers. They also highlight the importance of using antivirus software and keeping operating systems up to date. Entrust Corp provides software and hardware used to issue financial cards, e-passport production, user authentication for those looking to access secure networks or conduct financial transactions, trust certificates for websites, mobile credentials, and connected devices. The Lockbit ransomware gang claimed to have hacked the company and is threatening to leak the stolen files. The name of the company has been added to the Lockbit 3.0 Tor leak site. Cybersecurity researchers Dominic Alvieri published a notice sent to Entrust customers on July 6, which informed them that some files were taken from its internal systems. Initially, the group fixed the deadline for the payment of the ransomware on August 19th. At the time of the writing, the group started leaking the files. The group published tens of screenshots of allegedly, I don't even know if that's proper English, it doesn't sound right, but anyway, the group published tens of screenshots of allegedly stolen Entrust data, including accounting, legal, and marketing data. We promptly began an investigation with the assistance of a leading third-party cybersecurity firm and have informed law enforcement. Ken Cadet, Vice President of Communications at Entrust, said in a statement. While our investigation is ongoing, we have found no indication to date that the issue has affected the operation or security of our products and services, which are run in separate air-gapped environments from an internal system and are fully operational. Air-gapped. We just had a story, 15 minutes ago about hacks for air-gapped devices, right? Curiously, the Lockbit ransomware's Tor leak sites were unreachable due to a DDoS attack. The attack itself was launched by a threat actor ordering Lockbit gang to remove Entrust stolen data. According to the security research group VX Underground, the DDoS attacks against Tor sites of the gang were launched by someone linked to Entrust. DDoS attack began immediately after the publication of data and negotiations. Of course, it was them. Who else needs it? In addition, in the logs, there is an inscription demanding the removal of their data. Lockbit Sup told Bleeping Computer. The Donot Team has been active since 2016. It focuses on government and military organizations, ministries of foreign affairs, and embassies in India, Pakistan, Sri Lanka, Bangladesh, and other South Asian countries. In October 2021, a report released by the Amnesty International revealed that the Donot Team group employed Android applications posing as secure chat application and malicious emails and attacks aimed at a prominent Togolese human rights defender. In the past, the Donot Team spyware was found in attacks outside of South Asia. The investigation also discovered links between the spyware and infrastructure used in these attacks. The Inefu Labs, and Inefu Labs, a cybersecurity company based in India. The attack chain starts with spear phishing emails containing malicious attachments. The next stage, malware, is loaded once enabled Microsoft Office macros, or once Microsoft Office macros are enabled, opening RTF files exploiting equation editor vulnerability, and via remote template injection. Morphosec Labs has identified a new Donot infection chain that introduces new modules to the Windows framework. In this post, we detail the shellcode loader mechanism and its following modules, identify new functionality in the browser stealer component, and analyze a new DLL variant of the reverse shell. Reads the report published by Morphosec. Donot's latest spear phishing email campaign used RTF documents and targeted government departments, including Pakistan's defense sector. The group has now improved its Jacka Windows malware framework. For example, it has enhanced the browser stealer module. Unlike the previous version of the module, the new one uses 4 additional executables downloaded by the previous stage, wavemsmp.dll. Instead of implementing the stealing functionality inside the DLL, each additional executable allows to steal information from Google Chrome and or Mozilla Firefox. In the latest attacks, the group sent messages using RTF documents that trick users into enabling macros. Once the macros are enabled, a piece of shellcode is injected into memory. Then it downloads and executes a second stage shellcode from the command and control server. The second stage shellcode fetches the main DLL file, pgixcdfxglmjirdc.dll, from a different remote server. It's responsible for beaconing back to the command and control server that the infection was successful. It sends to the server the system information of the infected machine, then it downloads the next stage DLL, the module downloader wavemsmp.dll. The main purpose of this stage is to download and execute the modules used to steal the user's information. To understand which modules are used in the current infection, the malware communicates with another command and control server. It continues the report. The malware fetches the new address from an embedded link that refers to a Google Drive document containing the encrypted address. The attackers also implemented a reverse shell module that is recompiled as a DLL Its functionality remains the same, opening a socket to the attacker's machine located at 162.33.177.41, creating a new hidden command.exe process, and setting the stdin, stdiout, and stdrl error as the socket. Zscaler Threat Labs researchers observed a Grandero banking malware campaign targeting organizations in the Spanish-speaking nations of Mexico and Spain. The campaign began in June 2022 and is still ongoing. The attacks hit organizations in multiple industries such as automotive, chemicals manufacturing, and others. The threat actors behind this campaign impersonate Mexican government officials. The malware uses multiple anti-analysis techniques along with implementation of capture for evading sandboxes. In this campaign, the threat actors impersonate government officials from the Attorney General's Office of Mexico City and from the public ministry in the form of spear phishing emails in order to lure victims to download and execute Grandero, a prolific banking Trojan that has been active since at least 2016 and that specifically targets users in Latin America, reads the post published by Zscaler. Grandero is written in Delphi and utilizes techniques like binary padding to inflate binaries, capture implementation for sandbox evasion, and command and control communication using patterns that are identical to latent bot. The infection chain begins with a spear phishing message written in Spanish that includes a link that points to a website that further downloads a malicious zip archive on the victim's machine. The messages use payment refunds, litigation notifications, cancellation of mortgage loans, and deposit vouchers as lures. The zip archive contains the Grandero loader module with a PDF icon in order to lure the victim into opening it. Once the file is opened, it downloads and executes the Grandero payload 400 megabytes from a remote HFS server, which further communicates with the command and control server using traffic identical to latent bot. That's not all. The loader is also designed to gather system information, retrieve a list of installed antivirus solutions, cryptocurrency wallets, banking and mail apps, and exfiltrate the information to a remote server. Grandero is a continuously evolving threat that represents a serious threat to organizations worldwide. It's been active again since 2016. How many years is that? 6 years, continuously iterating and improving. Threat actors are dumping the Cobalt Strike penetration testing suite in favor of similar frameworks that are less known. After Brute Ratel, the open source cross-platform kit called Sliver is becoming an attractive alternative. However, malicious activity using Sliver can be detected using hunting queries drawn from analyzing the toolkit, how it works, and its components. Over the past years, Cobalt Strike has grown in popularity as an attack tool for various threat actors, including ransomware operations to drop on compromised networks, beacons that allow moving laterally to high-value systems. Since defenders have learned to detect and stop attacks relying on this toolkit, hackers are trying other options that can evade endpoint detection and response and antivirus solutions. Facing stronger defense against Cobalt Strike, threat actors have found alternatives. Palo Alto Networks observed them switch to Brute Ratel, an adversarial attack simulation tool designed to elude security products. A report from Microsoft notes that hackers, from state-sponsored groups to cybercrime gangs, are more and more using in attacks the Go-based Sliver security testing tool developed by researchers at Bishop Fox Cybersecurity Company. One group that adopted Sliver is tracked as Dev0237 by Microsoft. Also known as Fin12, the gang has been linked to various ransomware operations. The gang has distributed ransomware payloads from various ransomware operators in the past. There's Ryo, Conti, Hive, Conti, and Black Cat. I don't know why Conti's in there twice. Via various malware, including Bazaar Loader and TrickBot. According to a report from UK's Government Communications Headquarters, state-sponsored actors in Russia, specifically Apt29, aka Cozy Bear, the Dukes Grizzly, Step, have also used Sliver to maintain access to compromised environments. Microsoft notes that Sliver has been deployed in more recent attacks using the Bumblebee or Coltrane malware loader, which is associated with the Conti Syndicate as a replacement for Bazaar Loader. Despite being a novel threat, there are methods to detect malicious activity caused by the Sliver framework as well as by stealthier threats. Microsoft provides a set of tactics, techniques, and procedures that defenders can use to identify Sliver and other emerging command and control frameworks. Since the Sliver command and control network supports multiple protocols, DNS, HTTP, TLS, MTLS, TCP, and accepts implants, operator connections, and can host files to mimic a legitimate web server, threat hunters can set up listeners to identify anomalies on the network via Sliver infrastructure. Microsoft also shared information on how to detect Sliver payloads, shellcode, executables, shared libraries, DLLs, and services generated using the official non-customized code base for the command and control framework. For Sliver malware payloads that don't have much context, Microsoft recommends extracting configurations when they're loaded into memory, since the framework has to be deobfuscated and decrypted them to be able to use them. The framework also uses psexecute to run commands allowing for lateral movement. To make it easier for enterprises protected by Defender to identify Sliver activity in their environment, Microsoft has created, for the aforementioned commands, a set of hunting queries that can run in the Microsoft 365 Defender portal. The Log4Share flaw CVE 2021-44228 made the headlines in December after Chinese security researcher Pors9 publicly disclosed a proof of concept exploit for the critical remote code execution zero-day vulnerability, aka Log4Shell, that affects the Apache Log4j Java-based logging library. The flaw can be exploited for remote code execution, and it has been leveraged by both profit-driven cybercriminals and state-sponsored cyberspies. Log4Share impacts the products of several major companies that use Log4j, but in many attacks, the vulnerability has been exploited against affected VMware software. Now, researchers from Microsoft reported that Iran-linked apt tractus Mercury, aka Muddy Water, Static Kitten, Seed Worm, temp.zagros, has exploited the flaw against vulnerable SysAid apps used by Israeli organizations. The app group was officially linked by the U.S. government to Iran's Ministry of Intelligence and Security. Mercury has already exploited the Log4j in two past attacks, for example, targeting vulnerable VMware apps, but this is the first time the group has used SysAid apps as a vector for initial access. In recent weeks, Microsoft Threat Intelligence Center and Microsoft 365 Defender research team detected Iran-based threat actor Mercury leveraging exploitation of Log4j2 vulnerabilities in SysAid applications against organizations all located in Israel, reads the report published by Microsoft. The threat actor leveraged Log4j exploits against VMware applications earlier in 2022 and likely looked for similarly vulnerable internet-facing apps. SysAid, which provides IT management tools, might have presented as an attractive target for its presence in the targeted country. Despite SysAid has addressed the Log4Shell vulnerability shortly after its disclosure, several organizations have yet to apply the patches released by the company. Once a foothold in the target network has been gained, the threat actors establish persistence, dump credentials, and move laterally within the targeted organization. The group has used both custom and well-known hacking tools as well as built-in operating system tools for its hands-on keyboard attack. Researchers from Kaspersky attribute a series of attacks tracked as Gold Dragon against political and diplomatic entities located in South Korea in early 2022 to the North Korea-linked group Kimsuky. Kimsuky cyber espionage group, aka Black Banshee, Thallium, Velvet Kolima, was first spotted by Kaspersky researcher in 2013. It's 9 years old. At the end of October 2020, the U.S. CERT published a report on Kimsuky's recent activities that provided information on the TTPs and infrastructure. The app group mainly targets think tanks and organizations in South Korea. Other victims were in the United States, Europe, and Russia. The Gold Dragon campaign targets the media and a think tank in South Korea. The attack chain starts sending a spear phishing email with a weaponized Word document. Threat actors take advantage of HTML application or HTA and compiled HTML help or CHM files as bait documents. Once initial access to the target system is obtained, the attackers drop a Visual Basic script that is fetched from a remote server. The script allows to fingerprint the machine and retrieve additional malicious payloads. The app group configured multi-stage command and control servers with various commercial hosting services located around the world. The first stage command and control server verifies the incoming email address parameter is an expected one and only delivers the malicious document to the specific addresses. The first stage command and control server verifies the incoming email address parameter is an expected one and delivers the malicious document if it's the target list. The first stage script also forwards the victim's IP address to the next stage server, continues the report. When the fetch document is opened, it connects to the second command and control server. The corresponding script on the second command and control server checks the IP address forwarded from the first stage server to check if it's an expected request from the same victim. Using this IP validation scheme, the actor verifies whether the incoming request is from the victim or not. On top of that, the operator relies on several other processes to carefully deliver the next payload, such as checking operating system type and predefined user agent strings. Microsoft security researchers discovered a post-compromise malware tracked as Magic Web, which is used by the Russia-linked Nobelium app group to maintain persistent access to compromised environments. The Nobelium app, or App29, Cozy Bear, and the Dukes is the threat actor that conducted the supply chain attack against SolarWinds, which involved multiple families of implants, including the Sunburst backdoor, Teardrop malware, Goldmax malware, Cybot, and Goldfinder backdoors. Nobelium focuses on government organizations, non-governmental organizations, think tanks, military, IT service providers, health technology and research, and telecommunications providers. The Microsoft Threat Intelligence Center researchers believe that Magic Web was likely deployed during an ongoing compromise by Nobelium. The researchers pointed out that Nobelium app is still highly active. It managed multiple campaigns in parallel targeting government organizations, non-government organizations, intergovernmental organizations, and think tanks across US, Europe, and South and Central Asia. The experts found multiple similarities with the Foggy Web malware. It's been a long time since I've heard Foggy Web. That was detailed by Microsoft in September 2021. That's about right. That's about the last time I talked about Foggy Web. Foggy Web allows operators to exfiltrate the configuration database of compromised ADFS servers, decrypt token signing certificates and token decryption certificates, and download and execute additional malware components. Magic Web implements the above capabilities and also allows the manipulation of the claims passed in tokens generated by an Active Directory. Active Directory Federated Services server. The malware is able to manipulate the user authentication certificates, which are used for authentication, not the signing certificates used in attacks like Golden SAML. Magic Web is used in ADFS operations. Once administrative access to an ADFS server via elevation of privilege and lateral movement is gained, the attackers load the malicious DLL into the ADFS process by editing C Windows AD, FS, Microsoft.identity server, .servers host, .exe.config to specify a different public token which controls what loads into the ADFS process when it is started. Nobelium's ability to deploy Magic Web hinged on having access to highly privileged credentials that had administrative access to the ADFS servers, giving them the ability to perform whatever malicious activities they wanted to on the systems they had access to, concludes the report. It's critical to treat your ADFS server as a Tier 0 asset, protecting them with the same protections you would apply to a domain controller or other critical security infrastructure. Tox is a peer-to-peer serverless instant messaging service that uses NACI for encryption and decryption. Upticks researchers reported that threat actors have started using the Tox peer-to-peer instant messaging service as a command and control server. Tox has been used in the last months by threat actors as a communication channel between ransomware gangs and their victims. The researchers recently discovered an ELF sample that acts as a bot and can run scripts on the victim machine using the Tox protocol. The binary is written in C and is only statically linked to the C Tox core library. The shell underscore script variable analyzed by the experts kills certain programs that are known to infect Linux servers and deletes the cron tab, which is often used by malicious code to maintain persistence. A function called start_routine1 opens a file with a random file name in var temp and dumps the contents of the shell script in there and later executes it. Experts reported that the dropped shell script contains commands to kill processes associated with CryptoMiner. The pthread_create in the main function, also called the rstart_routine2 function, which sends the output of every command over UDP to the Tox recipient. The function could execute multiple commands on the machine, including nproc, whoami, and machine ID. While the discussed sample does not do anything explicitly malicious, we feel that it might be a component of a coin miner campaign. We're observing it for the first time where Tox protocol is used to run scripts onto the machine, concludes the report. We have seen attackers using Tox as a communication mechanism in the past, like in the HelloXD ransomware, where the attacker used Tox and onion-based messengers. Therefore, it becomes important to monitor the network components involved in the attack chains. Security researchers from Cypherma have discovered over 80,000 Hikvision cameras affected by a critical command injection vulnerability tracked to CVE 2021-36260. The Chinese vendor addressed the issue in September 2021, but tens of thousands of devices are yet to be patched. An attacker can exploit the flaw by sending specially crafted messages to the web server running on vulnerable devices. The vulnerability is an unauthenticated remote code execution vulnerability in Hikvision IP camera NVR firmware. It was discovered by a security researcher that goes online with the moniker Watchful IP. The majority of the recent camera product ranges of Hikvision cameras are susceptible to a critical remote unauthenticated code execution vulnerability, even with the latest firmwares, wrote the expert. This permits an attacker to gain full control of a device with an unrestricted root shell, which is far more access than even the owner of the device has, as they are restricted to a limited protected shell, which filters input to a predefined set of limited, mostly informational commands. Upon compromising the IP camera, an attacker can also use the hacked device to access internal networks, posing a risk to the infrastructure that the user that use the devices. The researcher pointed out that the exploitation of the issue doesn't require user interaction. The attacker only needs access to the HTTP or HTTPS server port, typically 80 or 443. Given the deployment of these cameras at sensitive sites, potentially even critical infrastructure is at risk, continues the post. No username or password needed, nor any actions need to be initiated by the camera owner. It'll not be detectable by any logging on the camera itself. The expert confirmed that every firmware developed since 2016 has been tested and found to be vulnerable. The vulnerability impacts Hikvision cameras and NVRs. A list of affected products was published in the security advisory published by the vendor. A command injection vulnerability in the web server of some tens of thousands is some Hikvision product. Due to the insufficient input validation, an attacker can exploit the vulnerability to launch a command injection attack by sending some messages with malicious commands, reads the vendor's advisory. The root cause of the problem is the insufficient input validation. The vulnerability was reported to the vendor in June, and the company fixed it on September 19th with the release of firmware updates. Since its public disclosure, 2 exploits for CVE 2021-36260 were publicly released in October 2021 and in February 2022, respectively. This means that it is quite easy for threat actors to scan the internet for vulnerable devices and compromise them. The issue is known to be actively exploited in the wild. In December 2021, Fortinet researchers reported that the Mirai-based botnet MooBot is leveraging the vulnerability in the web server of some Hikvision products. During our analysis, we observed numerous payloads attempting to leverage this vulnerability to probe the status of devices or extract sensitive data from victims. One payload in particular caught our attention. It tries to drop a downloader that exhibits infection behavior and that also executes MooBot, which is a DDoS botnet based on Mirai, reads the analysis published by Fortinet. Top 10 nations using Hikvision camera products include China, USA, and Vietnam. Other countries in the list are the UK, Ukraine, Thailand, South Africa, France, the Netherlands, and Romania. According to the experts, over 2,300 organizations using Hikvision cameras are still vulnerable. However, we have reasons to believe that Chinese threat groups such as Mission 2025 or /App41 or App10 and its affiliates, as well as unknown Russian threat actor groups, could potentially exploit vulnerabilities in these devices to fulfill their motives, reads a report published by Cypherma. Given the current geopolitical-driven cyber warfare brewing across the world, we suspect an uptick in cyber attacks from various nation-state threat actors on critical infrastructure, state entities, defense organizations, and many more. Open vulnerabilities and ports in such devices will only compound the impact on targeted organizations and their country's economic and state prowess, concludes the report. It is paramount to patch the vulnerable software of the Hikvision camera products to the latest version. Organizations need to adopt an ETLM-powered, risk-based approach to cybersecurity decision-making to minimize possible exposures and threats coming their way. Researchers from Northwestern University disclosed an 8-year-old security vulnerability in the Linux kernel dubbed Dirty Cred, which they defined as nasty as dirty pipe. The dirty pipe flaw tracked to CVE 2022-0847 was discovered by the security expert Max Kellerman that explained that it can allow local users to gain root privileges on all major distros. Dirty Cred is a kernel exploitation concept that swaps unprivileged kernel credentials with privileged ones to escalate privilege. Instead of overriding any critical data fields on kernel heap, Dirty Cred abuses the heap memory reuse mechanism to get privileged. Although the concept is simple, it is effective, reads the advisory published by the experts. The Dirty Cred issue exploits an unknown vulnerability tracked to CVE 2022-2588 to escalate privileges. The CVE 2022-2588 flaw is used after free issue that resides in the root 4 change in the net scheduled CLS root.c filter implementation in the Linux kernel. The vulnerability allows a local privileged attacker to crash the system, potentially leading to a local privilege escalation. The experts explained that the exploits written with Dirty Cred would work with different kernels and architectures. RE Security, a Los Angeles-based cybersecurity company protecting Fortune 500 worldwide companies, identified a new RAT, or remote access administration tool, or remote access Trojan, advertised in dark web and Telegram called Escanor. The threat actors offer Android-based and PC-based versions of RET, along with HVNC module and exploit builder to weaponize Microsoft Office and Adobe PDF documents to deliver malicious code. The tool has been released for sale on January 26th this year, initially as a compact HVNC implant allowing to set up a silent remote connection to the victim's computer, and later transformed into a full-scale commercial RAT with a rich feature set. Escanor has built a credible reputation in the dark web and attracted over 28,000 subscribers on the Telegram channel. In the past, the actor with exactly the same moniker released cracked versions of other dark web tools, including VenomRat, 888Rat, and Pandora HVNC, which were likely used to enrich further functionality of Escanor. The mobile version of Escanor, also known as Escrat, is actively used by cybercriminals to attack online banking customers by interception of OTP codes. The tool can be used to collect GPS coordinates of the victim, monitor keystrokes, activate hidden cameras, and browse files on their mobile devices to steal data. Fraudsters monitor the location of the victim and leverage Escrat to steal credentials to online banking platforms and perform unauthorized access to compromised account from the same device and IP. In such cases, fraud prevention teams are not able to detect it and react timely, said Ali Sefelden, a malware analyst with RE Security Incorporated, who investigated several recent online banking theft cases. The majority of the samples detected recently have been delivered using Escanor Exploit Builder. The actors are using decoy documents imitating invoices and notifications from popular online services. DDoS protection pages are associated with browser checks performed by WAF CDN services, which verify if the site visitor is a human or a bot. Recently, security experts from Sucuri spotted JavaScript injections targeting WordPress sites to display fake DDoS protection pages, which lead victims to download remote access Trojan malware. Unfortunately, attackers have begun leveraging these familiar security assets in their own malware campaigns. We recently discovered a malicious JavaScript injection affecting WordPress websites, which results in a fake Cloudflare DDoS protection pop-up, reads the post published by Sucuri. The page above requests that the visitor clicks on a button to bypass the DDoS protection and visit the site. However, upon clicking on the button, the security install.iso file is downloaded to the victim's machine. The file poses as a tool required to bypass the DDoS verification. In order to trick the visitors into opening the file, a new message tells them that the verification code to access the website is contained in the file. Upon opening the file, the image file is mounted and its content is shown to the visitors. The mounted drive contains a file called security-install.exe, which is actually a Windows shortcut that runs a PowerShell command contained in the debug.txt file in the same drive. Launching the security-install.exe, the infection chain starts with a fake DDoS code being displayed. Ultimately, this causes a chain of scripts to run that display the fake DDoS code needed to view the site. The process leads to the installation of the NetSupport RAT Remote Access Trojan. Below are the recommendations for regular website visitors. Make sure your computer is running a robust antivirus program. Place two-factor authentication on all important logins, such as your bank and social media. You practice good browsing habits. Don't open strange files. Keep your browser and all software on your computer updated, patched. Use a script blocker in your browser, which is an advanced feature. Threat actors have exploited a zero-day flaw in General Bytes Bitcoin ATM servers that allowed them to hijack transactions associated with deposits and withdrawal of funds. General Bytes is the world's largest Bitcoin blockchain and cryptocurrency ATM manufacturer. The ATM machines manufactured by the company are remotely controlled by a crypto application server, which manages the operation of the devices. The company published a security advisory on August 18th, admitting the existence of a zero-day flaw actively exploited by threat actors in the wild. The attackers exploited the issue to create an admin user account via the CAS admin panel. The attacker was able to create an admin user remotely via CAS administrative interface via a URL call on the page that is used for the default installation on the server and creating the first administration user. This vulnerability has been present in CAS software since version 2020-1208, reads the advisory. According to the advisory, the issue resides in the CAS admin interface. Threat actors scanned DigitalOcean cloud hosting IP address space for CAS services exposing port 7777 or 443. Then attackers exploited the vulnerability to create a new default admin user, organization, and terminal. Threat actors accessed the CAS interface and renamed the default admin user to GB, then modified the crypto settings of two-way machines with his wallet settings and the invalid payment address setting. These settings allow the attackers to forward coins to the attacker's wallet when customers sent coins to ATM. According to the advisory, the attacks came 3 days after the company publicly announced to help the Ukraine feature on ATMs. General Bytes recommends customers install the 2-server patch releases. The company also shared instructions for configuring server firewalls to control access to crypto application servers. Twilio's investigation into the attack on August 4th reveals that hackers gained access to some Authy user accounts and registered unauthorized devices. Authy is a two-factor authentication service from Twilio that allows users to secure their online accounts where the feature is supported by identifying a second time via a dedicated app after typing in the login credentials. When logging into an account with two-factor authentication enabled, Authy will provide an additional one-time passcode required to log in. This protects the account from being accessed even if the login credentials are compromised. Because of this, it's vital to secure your Authy account, as if hackers gain access to it, they can log into your compromised account. Thursday, Twilio announced that the threat actor that gained access to its infrastructure on August 4th has also gained access to something like 99 Authy users and linked devices to those accounts. Twilio underlines that the compromised Authy accounts belong to individual users and represent a small fraction of the total number of 75 million users. However, for those 93 users, the hackers would have been able to access the two-factor authentication codes generated for the Authy users' accounts. It's unclear if the 93 Authy users were specifically targeted by the attackers. The company says that it has removed the unauthorized devices from the compromised accounts and has contacted the affected users to provide instructions on how to protect their accounts, review any linked accounts for suspicious activity, and work with their account providers if they have any concerns, review all devices tied to their Authy account, and remove any additional devices they don't recognize. To prevent the addition of unauthorized devices, it's recommended that users add a backup device and disable Allow Multi-Device in the Authy application. Users can re-enable Allow Multi-Device to add new devices at any time. The cloud communications company also says it is investigating, its investigation identified 163 Twilio users whose data was accessed by the intruders for a limited period. The Twilio data breach appears to be part of a larger campaign from hackers that target at least 130 organizations, among them MailChimp, Klaviyo, and Cloudflare. Threat actors abused a vulnerable anti-cheat driver named mHyprot2.sys for the Genshin Impact video game to disable antivirus software. According to Trend Micro, a cybercrime gang abused the driver to deploy ransomware. The driver provides anti-cheat functions, but threat actors have found a way to use it to escalate privileges and kill the processes and services associated with endpoint protection applications. However, when a legitimate driver is used as a rootkit, that's a different story, such as the case of mHyprot2.sys, a vulnerable anti-cheat driver for the popular role-playing game Genshin Impact. The driver is currently being abused by a ransomware actor to kill antivirus processes and services for mass deploying ransomware, reads the report published by Trend Micro. Security teams and defenders should note that mhypro2.sys can be integrated into any malware. The attack abusing the mhypro2.sys driver was spotted by the security firm during the last week of July 2022 when threat actors attempted to deploy ransomware. The code signing for mhypro2.sys was still valid at the time of the report. Experts pointed out that the use of this driver is independent of the game, which means that Genshin Impact does not need to be installed on a victim's device. Experts warn that of the availability of proof of concept code exploiting the driver for multiple purposes, a POC provided by user Kagaruzakasanye allows to terminate 360 total security. In the attack analyzed by the experts, threat actors deployed a malicious Windows installer posing as AVG Internet Security to the domain controller. The installer dropped and executed the driver used in the attack. Trendmichael believes that the threat actor intended to mass deploy the ransomware using the domain controller via startup login script. It's still rare to find a module with code signing as a device driver that can be abused. The point of this case is that a legitimate device driver module with valid code signing has the capability to bypass privileges from user mode to kernel mode, concluded the experts. As mentioned above, this module is very easy to obtain and will be available to everyone until it's erased from existence. It could remain for a long time as a useful utility for bypassing privileges. Certificate revocation and antivirus detection might help to discourage the abuse, but there are no solutions at this time because it is a legitimate module. Hey, we now move on to other security news. The U.S. Cybersecurity Infrastructure Security Agency, CISA, has added a high-severity flaw impacting Palo Alto Networks' PAN-OS to its known exploited vulnerabilities catalog based on evidence of the active exploitation. According to Binding Operation Directive BOD 2201, reducing the significant risk of known exploited vulnerabilities, FCEB agencies have to address the identified vulnerabilities by the due date to protect their networks against attacks exploiting the flaws in the catalog. The issue, tracked to CV 2022-0028, CVS's score of 8.6, is a URL filtering policy misconfiguration that could be exploited by an unauthenticated remote attacker to carry out reflected and amplified TCP denial of service attacks. A Palo Alto Networks PAN-OS URL filtering policy misconfiguration could allow a network-based attacker to conduct reflected and amplified TCP denial of service attacks, reads an advisory published by CSA. Last week, the vendor reported that threat actors are exploiting the CVE 2022-0028 vulnerability in Palo Alto Networks devices running the PAN-OS to launch reflected amplification denial of service attacks. The vendor has learned that firewalls from multiple vendors are abused to conduct distributed denial of service attacks, but it did not disclose the name of the impacted companies. Palo Alto Networks recently learned that an attempted reflected denial of service attack was identified by a service provider. This attempted attack took advantage of susceptible firewalls from multiple vendors, including Palo Alto Networks. We immediately started to root cause and remediate the issue. Reads the advisory published by Palo Alto Networks. Exploitation of this issue does not impact the confidentiality, integrity, or availability of our products. It just abuses our products, turns it into a weapon. But whatever. The root cause of the issue affecting the Palo Alto Network devices is misconfiguration in the PAN-OS URL filtering policy that allows a network-based attacker to conduct reflected and amplified TCP DOS attacks. The DOS attack would appear to originate from a Palo Alto Networks PA series, hardware, VM series, virtual, and CN series container firewall against a target chosen by the attackers. Worldwide connectivity has unleashed global digitalization, creating cross-border social networks for communicating and spreading information. The use of digital identity for democratic procedures is becoming a reality, and public services are shifting towards using digital tools to implement simplified procedures. Businesses worldwide have benefited from implementing information technologies tools, and Industry 4.0 increasingly relies on cloud services and the internet. Likewise, the e-commerce and platforms economy has developed in a way that was unthinkable only 30 years ago. All this has contributed to creating a new and broader concept of cyberspace, where the notion of security is increasingly relevant. Thus, the very pervasiveness of digitalization has made cybersecurity no longer only a matter of concern for computer scientists, but a central transversal factor in securitizing our future digital society. Recently, both the COVID-19 related rise in the use of digital tools and the conflict in Ukraine, followed by an escalation in the use of weaponized cyber attacks, have raised questions about the security of cyberspace and how the EU should deal with this. This study, edited by Professor Luigi Martino and Nada Gamal, approaches the topic from a multidisciplinary point of view, considering critical infrastructure, skills, strategic autonomy, AI, cybercrime, privacy, and the use of space starting from an EU perspective. The authors examine the regulatory achievements in this field and consider best practices for the implementation of rules and standards. Based on a holistic approach, the explanations and policy recommendations in the various chapters aim to define the role of the European Union in this dynamic and constantly changing world of cyberspace. During the latest edition of the DEF CON Hackings Conference held in Las Vegas, the group of white hat hackers Shaditel demonstrated how to take control of a satellite in geostationary orbit. The group used a satellite called Anik F1R, which was dismissed in 2020. The group was authorized to perform the hack, and the satellite they hacked had been decommissioned, which means that it is going to be sent to a graveyard orbit. The graveyard, also called a junk orbit, is an orbit that lies away from the common operational orbits. Some satellites are moved into such orbits at the end of their operational life to avoid colliding with operational spacecraft and satellites. One of the members of the group, Carl Kosher, explained that they had access to an unused uplink facility which included the hardware to connect to a satellite. Kosher said that they also had a license to use the uplink and a lease on the satellite's transponder, which is a unit that opens a channel between the receiving and the transmitting antennas. Lorenzo Franceschi Bicchiere wrote on Motherboard. The group of hackers was able to stream the talks at the hacking conference TourCon last year, along with hacker movies like War Games. Kosher and his group highlighted the risks that threat actors once gained access to the risks posed once attackers gain access to an uplink facility. They could take control of decommissioned satellites to conduct malicious activities. Kosher explained that it is quite easy to find the hardware to connect the satellite. The group used a HackRF software-defined radio peripheral capable of transmission or reception of radio signals from 1 MHz to 6 GHz. The software is cheap and will cost around $300. And that's the news. Thanks again for watching. Don't forget to share and subscribe if you haven't already. And smash the bell if you haven't already. And I'll see you on the next episode. Take care.